the first thing, well, I guess introductions are in place and everything, but before that done, I want to tell everybody, serve yourself some alcohol. Get a bottle of mezcal before we start talking, whichever you have at hand, and pour yourself and let those aromas start filling your room. So please, even before anything else happens, pour yourself a mezcalito. Yeah, now we can start.
Well, see, this is mezcal, and then this is mezcalito.
Yeah.
Right?
And cheers to everyone.
So Chava made a good point. We got to start off with a little taste. We have to acclimate ourselves before this sensory experience, so it's very important. Let me take this moment first of all to welcome everybody. Welcome Shaker and Spoon family to our Mezcal sensory experience. This is our Shaker and Spoon happy hour, and we have a format, but every time we do something a little new, something a little different, we have the Mezcal box coming up in a couple weeks. Everybody will have them in hand, and so what we wanted to do, since so many people already have their mezcal at home, this will give you a way to sort of understand the spirit a little bit more, learn how to taste it, experience it, and appreciate it, because I think a lot of people have misnomers about the spirit. And also, once we start throwing them into cocktails, granted those cocktails are designed with these specific spirits in mind, but you lose a little bit of some of that, some of the nuances between these different types of agave and the different styles of production that we'll be able to talk about here. So speaking of talking about mezcal, I have somebody joining us today who knows a little bit about the topic. This is Chava Periban, and he is all over not only mezcal as a spirit, but the production of mezcal and the growth of that agave. And his focus is on achieving sustainable, fair, and beautiful products, including agave spirits, and also the agave adobe bricks that he's going to be talking about later. But it sort of runs the gamut, anything that is agave related. And he's with us today from Mexico City, the far off land of the Central Time Zone.
The wild land of Mexico City.
But Chava, take it away. Start us with a little bit of what drew you to mezcal in the first place, and then sort of ease us all into how to approach it and appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dan. And really, guys, you have no idea what pleasure is it for me to share about this, because it's as you were saying, we make jokes all the time in the mezcal context, where we say this is probably one of the most challenging areas of interest you can have, because you have to be a biologist, you have to be a chemist, you have to be an anthropologist, a sociologist, you have to be interested in taxonomy, you have to be interested in combustion, in distillation, in history, in all these things, because all of that is condensed in the traditions and innovations related or connected to mezcal or agave spirits. And if I have a short answer of why I'm so interested in this category, is because I love this complexity in which, even if you want to really close your focus, you cannot. You have to have a really open understanding of things and understand all these interconnections between history and biology and chemistry and combustion systems. Otherwise, you're just getting a tiny bit of the picture. And starting from there and talking about little parts of the picture, all these things that I asked you to do, like the Mezcal Water, is because this is how I love to approach agave spirits or mezcal in general, because you have to dissect it. I really claim that it's one of the most complex things that you will ever put on your mouth. You know, like, granted, there's mole, and maybe mole is right up there in terms of complexity of flavors, or some sort of other mysterious Icelandic concoction made with fermented shark. But I think mezcal, it's so complex that I think it paralyzes many of us. I remember the first time I tried mezcal, and this is being recorded, so I don't know I can say the age when that happened, but it was definitely not after the legal age in the US of A, and I was so confused. I was like, it was like entering the Tower of Babel. It is like suddenly you are given an insight into your own language. It's like you walk into a room, everybody's speaking English, but suddenly it's in a way that you can't really understand what they're saying. You understand the individual words, but you don't understand what the message is. So I understood a lot of things about mezcal when I tried it, right? There's a lot of things to that are similar to other things you've tried. But as a whole, at least I found it tremendously confusing. And that's why I wanted for you guys to do this mezcal water to start with. And this is something that happened to me accidentally the first time. I was having a mezcal. I left it overnight at one side of my bed. And then I woke up in the morning. I was like, hey, how will this taste after all the alcohol has evaporated and you're left?
If this first time was accidental, were you drinking mezcal in bed?
I shall not answer that precisely.
Okay.
I might have, or maybe I was drinking mezcal outside and I just walk into my house with a glass of mezcal in my hand.
Okay.
You know, there's this Mexican tradition of la caminera. So when you're leaving a party, you're leaving with a glass of mezcal or the drink you're having. So maybe it was a caminera, maybe I was drinking in my bed. We'll never know.
Let's go with that.
This, it's how I prepare my agua de mezcal. I decided to use a very fancy jicarita. And the objective for this is, you know, also when you ask mezcaleros or the people that make these spirits, how does mezcal taste like? They're never going to answer you like, oh, well, this tastes like raspberries or like freshly cut grass or like kiwi. They always answer you like mezcal, like agave. And that's such a confusing answer, right? Because you're like, well, then how does agave taste like? And I think almost, oh, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe some of you have done this, but it's extremely bizarre that someone in this group or in any group that I ever present to has eaten cooked agave. Has any of you eaten cooked agave as a candy? Okay, awesome. 2 of us. Okay, so I don't know for you guys, but the first time I ate cooked agave, my whole relationship to agave spirits changed at the spot. Because with most other alcohols that people have tried, you have eaten the raw material that was used to make that alcohol. So you have sort of an understanding, you know, when you're drinking wine, you've eaten grapes. So you have sort of a familiar ground with that. Agave is this mysterious thing that most of people have never eaten in its raw form. So for me to make this agüita de agave, it's a great way to sort of just take the alcohol out of the mix and try to drink the closest to the agave. So that being said, cheers. Take your first sip of agüita of agave. If you try that, and if it doesn't have any flies, and you were diligent with the instructions. Cheers, guys.
I mean, you feel like you think you know what's coming because the smell is so familiar, but it really is like agua de mezcal. It's like, yeah.
And if I can be honest, I believe, and don't quote me on this because I might be attacked and burned by the authorities of the good sayings of mezcal, but I really think that most of the first mezcales that Mexico saw were probably very low ABV and were drank more as a wine while eating than as a hard liquor. So I think this is also sort of a traveling in time kind of experience where you're trying probably one of the first forms in which mezcal existed in Mexico. And after that, and this is another thing that happened to me accidentally, I was giving some presentations in Philadelphia to a very young audience, and almost all of them were in the hospitality industry, and they were maybe between 22 to 25. And I was shocked. I was shocked intensively because a lot of them wouldn't drink mezcal straight. And I was thinking when I was 22, 25, if anybody would have given me just straight liquor, I would have never said no. I was 22, like, right? Like, who in their right mind at 22 years says no to hard liquor out of a small glass and something that sounds mysterious? For me, it was just like mind-boggling. Like, who are you kids? This is a generation that has been ruined. And sorry for my strong feelings. But then I had to come up with an idea of, okay, I was like, okay, these guys are not sipping the mezcal that I'm giving them. So how can I come up with something that, and I was talking to you with Dan, and I think it was funny. I said something to mellow the trauma, something that will give you access to the flavors without the burn. And that's when I came up with the idea of the atomizer. So probably all of you guys have a better looking atomizer than I do. Mine was handcrafted by the honest hands of whoever works at the market around my house, and probably throws a lot more liquid than what you guys have. So the atomizer is amazing for two reasons. Reason number one is you can point it to your hand and just throw a little bit of mezcal on your hand and rub it. And this is sort of a very close experience connected to the agua de mezcal. All the alcohols that are, not all, but a significant amount of the alcohols that are inside the mezcal are going to evaporate once they touch your really warm skin. And what you're going to be able to smell left over on your skin, it's all of those mysterious things that actually the science have not been able to map that informs the flavors of mezcal. All those esters, benzenes, fatty acids, just fat, all these oils, all this stuff that everybody scratches their head trying to figure out. That's what's going to be left behind in your skin. And again, if you've never eaten cooked agave, this is something that gets very close to that experience. For at least for my nose, for my Mexican nose, this smells really close to like roasted sweet potato. I don't know, maybe sweet potato tastes different in everywhere around the world, but just for my specific nose and palate, that's a little bit of the smell that I get behind. And then the second thing with the atomizer is point it at yourself, not just at your eyes. You can close your eyes while you do this. Just open your mouth. Just throw a little bit in there. So that what that's gonna do, it's a little bit, I don't know if you've seen the wine kids or the coffee kids, that sometimes they do very loud sounds when they're sipping stuff. And they're trying to atomize things. So everything like hits all the sensory elements of their mouth. In a way, that's what this technique is trying to emulate without such strong sounds, and also like in a funnier way. I think I've never had more fun than when I was walking around the bar with something like this on my hand, just shooting shots to people's mouths. And again, it's like I'm just trying to deconstruct the flavor of what we're gonna taste at the end, which sort of we did at the beginning.
You're also taking a large volume and adding, air to it, which is essentially like for anybody that's purchased one of those little wine aerators, basically that you can hold over a glass and pour from the bottle, and it'll aerate into the glass, or aerate into a carafe or a larger glass container. That's a great way of looking at it, where basically it's spreading it over. It's like what when we're sort of attacked and you walk into like Macy's, where like all the perfume people come at you and they spray and like the whole place. But this is great. It's like a directed little thing where it can just be sort of in the air, and then you can lean forward and grab a little bit of that aroma and not be smacked in the face or in the mouth by it, and be able to pinpoint some of the various little flavors.
Absolutely.
Chava, make sure that we don't skip over some of the basics of mezcal, because we have folks here who maybe have never experienced mezcal before, to people who have made mezcal cocktails and have sipped different types of mezcal. So we shouldn't breeze over it, but we can briefly talk about like the differences, because we've done tequila before, where people understand what the rules are in order for it to be called tequila, that it needs to come from these states, etc. If you can give like a brief synopsis of what that means for mezcal, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I just always privilege drinking first, information later. It's
we had a sip, we sprayed ourselves in the face, so we can go a little info and then go back into the spraying ourselves again.
Absolutely. So again, absolutely yes. The only other thing we'll do before giving you guys a really not comprehensive, but just say like a brief synopsis of what are we doing. I will suggest again for you guys to just get a little bit of mezcal in something. The glass you shouldn't be using is something like this. This is a glass that is terrible for drinking mezcal because you have a lot of alcohol packed in a very small place. So if you use this, you're going to put it close to your nose, and your nose is going to get impaired by the aggressive amount of alcohol is going to go up. So I like to use something like this, just a massive bowl that allows to get half of my head inside and allows me to try it. So yes, basics. Let's go to basics. So first of all, what the hell is mezcal, right? And sometimes I forget that, like since I think the first article that was written saying mezcal is having a moment was in the 2000s, early 2000s. And since then, every year there's a magazine article that says mezcal is having a moment. Mezcal is becoming really popular. And the truth is it is in certain places. As Dan was mentioning, if you're in San Francisco, San Diego, New York, LA, or in like the hip, cool towns, every hipster is really, really excited about mezcal. And also everybody that has been in the industry for a while is very excited. But once you start traveling outside of those hot hubs, like I was in the Philippines, for example, nobody knew what mezcal was. I was in a cricket club in Philadelphia giving a presentation. Nobody knew what mezcal was. So the way to make the difference with tequila, which is I think the first and foremost question that everybody asks, is it's basically the really short answer is they're different deals. They're different denomination of origins. They are two categories of alcohol that have to follow different rules in order to use that name on their bottle. If you see any of the bottles of mezcal that you may have at hand, all of them have the word mezcal on it, right? Word mezcal. And not only mezcal, all of these bottles also say artisanal mezcal. And I'm gonna get into that in a moment. But in order for you to use that word, you have to follow a number of rules. And the body in charge of checking that you follow all of that will go to your facilities, will check every batch that you made, and will give you an hologram or a certification that you follow all of these rules. The most basic difference with tequila and the rules that tequila has to follow is that tequila can only use one species of agave. So imagine that in the wine world, you could only use Cabernet Sauvignon. That is a tequila denomination of origin. They decided that the agave called Tequila Azul or Blue Beber is a scientific name. And I'm going to get into that. And, like I'm going to always be saying two names for each agave that I'm going to mention. One is the scientific name, and the other one is the popular name. So for example, Dan, the way he introduced to me was Chava. Chava is my nickname. Everybody knows me as Chava. Like nobody, if you tell anybody like who is Salvador, nobody knows. But Salvador is my scientific name. It's a name that is written in my birth certificate. So agaves are like me. They have their nicknames and they have their scientific names that are written in their birth certificates. And so Tequila Azul will be like the nickname, and Blue Beber is a scientific name. And you'll see that in all of these bottles, right? The two Oaxacan bottles that I have behind me, that Lost Explorer and Sicaru, they're made of espadin, agave espadin, and the scientific name for that is Angustifolia Ho. And that takes around 8 years to grow, to get to maturity. So just mentioning that difference between tequila and mezcal, I think another really a marvelous thing about mezcal is you can use any species of agave you want under the sun. There's not one agave that you cannot use. So you can go into the fields and literally discover new species of agave that have never been used or considered to do a new expression, which makes mezcal amazingly infinite and infinitely exciting. Because can you imagine as a maker, it's like if you're a painter and you never know what's the end of the spectrum of colors that you can use. And you have the opportunity to find a new blue that nobody has ever spoken about because you decided to go into the mountains and found this agave that has amazing flavors. Actually, La Luna, which is also behind me, if you read the label, it says that it's an ensemble, which is a combination of agaves, which is also very allowed in mezcal. You can use just one agave, or as in wine, you can use blends. And one of the agaves there, it's not even being scientifically defined. So it's agave sp. Anyways, so I think I got really into the biology. Sorry, I get excited about this stuff. And in terms of the other really basic stuff about mezcal, it's like any other alcohol in a way. It's fermented and it's distilled. But there's ways in which mezcal is made that I think the alcohol world has not seen in the last 3 centuries. Just to give you a very precise example, I'll claim that 90, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, Don, but you know way more about the European world of alcohol that I do. I will claim that 98% of the alcohol we drink these days is not distilled with direct fire. Will that be slightly accurate?
You would say that most things that are distilled, like volume-wise, are not distilled on direct fire?
With direct fire, with a naked flame touching an alembic.
No, most of them, no. Yeah, most of them have like a structure around the base. Some of the older, I mean, you'll find it in like cognac and Armagnac, where there will be the structure around, but there still will be open flame under the alembic. But for the most part, it's basically heat, but there is a layer between the open flame and the still.
Yes, and I will say that 98% of the mezcal you'll drink is distilled with direct fire. And this is just to give an example of how a lot of the techniques or traditions that were really common in the making of alcohol around the world that stopped being used because they were not super efficient, they were a little bit more dangerous, or they were more unpredictable, they are still living and kicking in the mezcal world. Another thing that I believe that it's significantly amazing about mezcal as a category is the part of fermentation. So again, like I love my 98% statement because it can mean whatever. The grand majority of alcohol that we drink in this planet, it's being fermented in closed containers, right? Like if you've been to a brewery, most of you guys have been to a brewery where they make beer, you never see open containers. They're always closed stainless steel containers. And the reason to do that is because if you open a container and you let it ferment, it is like if you were making a block party with a huge sign outside that says free alcohol in a neighborhood in Mexico City. Can you imagine the amount of people that are going to get through your door? Like it'll be absolute mayhem. So doing open container fermentation is basically doing a block party with free alcohol for whoever shows up. And that is extremely challenging, though it also creates really fascinating flavors. And all of the mezcals that I have behind me, they do that. They ferment open fermentation. They don't throw any yeasts that they prefabricated. They just like open the doors of their party, and whatever yeast gets by is what is going to allow to ferment the drink. And I think that also, like if you, in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, buy one of these bottles, it will have a vintage. It will be distinct. Consistency, it's not necessarily desired, and honestly, it's not really possible in most of mezcal production just because of open fermentation. The yeasts that are happy during the winter are very distinct to the yeasts that are going to be happy during the summer. So I think that's a little bit of the basics.
And then what about like with tequila and like, so one of the things that people should understand is that if you're looking at this like a Venn diagram, it's not a Venn diagram, it's actually concentric circles. The larger circle is mezcal. The smaller circle is tequila. So although, because mezcal can be made from far more agave and also in more states in Mexico than tequila.
In 8 states. I mean, another really important thing, it's one of the things that gets all the mezcal connoisseurs or enthusiasts really intense is the ABV, the alcohol that a good traditional mezcal should have, right? And everybody has super strong opinions about it. Some people say, I don't drink anything under 45. Some people say, I don't drink anything over 45. But by denomination of origin, it has to be between 35 to 55. Are there beautiful things that are under 35? Yes, I have something in my house that is 25 ABV, and I think it's delightful. It becomes like an agua de mezcal. Are there things that are 65 ABV, 130 proof? Can you imagine that delightfulness? And they are grandiose. I mean, I hope it doesn't make me look like someone that has a problem with alcohol, but 130 proof can be really delicious, I promise. And but the denomination of origin again is 35 to 55. I think something to what you're mentioning, Don, it's that, you know, like I think from the mezcal perspective, some mezcal kits we get all like, well, mezcal is better because we can use more mezcales, we can make it in 8 states around Mexico, we have more types of technologies, we have more. But something really amazing about tequila is that it's really focused. So the way I like to think about tequila is like when you go to a Japanese restaurant and someone decided to dedicate their life to one dish. And you go there and you can ask 6 or 12. Those are your 2 options of the same thing. So tequila is sort of that. It's super specialization, and mezcal is just a beautiful mayhem that will take you your lifetime to explore. To give you an example, for example, from La Luna, which is, and that's another thing, right? Most people think mezcal and they think immediately just Oaxaca. And it is true. A lot of what we call like the textbook mezcales, like Sicaru and the Lost Explorer, are definitely made in Oaxaca. And they are amazing. But there's also 8 other states where you can make mezcal. And one of them, that is Michoacan. La Luna specifically is made in a town called Indaparapeo. Really hard to remember that. Indaparapeo. And that's like an hour away from Morelia, the capital of Michoacan. And the way they make this is with something they call a Filipino steel, or an internal capturation alembic. And if I wanted to explain that, it will take me probably 40 minutes and 50 minutes to just explain that piece of technology. But what it's crazy, it's really connected to the Asian tradition of distillation. So if you think about this, in Mexico, we have areas where we distill more in ways that are connected to the European tradition with copper and serpentines. And we also have the Asian way of distilling. For me, that's just mind-boggling, no? Like the amount of richness that we have, not only of agaves, of biological resources, but of technologies in which we can transform these agaves. And actually, I'm going to serve myself a little bit of Oaxaca because I've been speaking too much and drinking too little.
So this is a great opportunity to we should exactly stop talking and make sure that we're sipping again. But what I'd really like to do, since this is part of like our sensory experience, is to let's go through these mezcal and talk about, because we've done, you know, on any session where we've done like neat spirits beyond just cocktails, but neat spirits, we always talk about making sure that the glass is far away from your nose at first, slowly making your way in, keeping your mouth open a little bit, because you're smelling something that's usually starting around 40% ABV, not like a glass of wine where you put your face in the whole bowl and that's at about 12, 13% sometimes. So people are familiar with those things, but if you want to walk us through one of the ones you have, you can choose whichever one you want, and talk about what people should look for when they're smelling and tasting mezcal.
Absolutely. And also I had suggested to try and mess a little bit with the temperatures of it. So I think this is a great opportunity to jump into that side. So I'm going to take the Lost Explorer just because I've been mostly sipping La Luna, and that also gives me the chance to talk about really containers. So you see, like something like this is great because it really allows the mezcal to open. Something like this is also great. These I wouldn't use, just constrains a lot the flavors. I won't really allow you to catch most. So I use the Lost Explorer. So the first thing that I do when I'm gonna like critically going to taste agave spirits or mezcal, it's I smell it for a while. And that's why I love this super big container, because it would allow, like I think I'm not doing great things for how I'm presenting myself, but I will just smell for a while. And really, because I mean, I wouldn't say that it is critical for it to open, but it will be changing. So if you have a few glasses around you, I will recommend you put yourself a little bit in a glass and just forget about it for half an hour and then get back to it. But just smell it for a good moment. Just like really try to dissect it with your nose. And then after that, I will take the smallest sip you've ever had in your life. You know,
And
it's
remember,
like,
when you guys are smelling, remember to crack your mouth open a little tiny bit. I know it sounds crazy, and sometimes people forget and they like start going like this. You don't have to do that. Like the smallest little crack is all you need, because what ends up happening is you pull it in and it actually runs through your sinuses, and without you doing anything, comes back and makes its way like between the top and bottom of your mouth and your tongue, as it's sort of like escaping the vacuum that is your head, right? It has
yes,
nowhere else to go. It's not going to pop out your ears. So when you actually do like a little smell, and again, away from the glass, you want to move towards the glass until you start to smell something sweet. And then as you push forward, you want to keep going until all of a sudden you're hit with like a wall of alcohol. If you've hit alcohol, you've gone too far. You want to go pull a little bit back so you can get a little bit more of the nuances of that particular spirit and not be overwhelmed by the actual like ethanol itself.
absolutely. And honestly, whoever, like, I mean, I was reading the whole story of the Lost Explorer. I am fascinated about the nose in this one. It is just absolutely fruity. It's gorgeous. It's something that you can like. It's something you can sip really pleasantly without being overwhelmed. I think this is a super dangerous bottle because you can finish it without really realizing that happened. So, but again, like I haven't even tried it. I'm just spending a lot of time with the nose. And something that you're mentioning, Daniel, I'm going to call you because I'm being challenged by your name. Sorry, my Spanglish, it's terrible. But something really fascinating about this ABV, this is at 42. It's just take the tiniest little sip you've ever had in your life. Yeah, like your first boyfriend, girlfriend kiss you ever had, that one. Just like a tiny, tiny. And that's going to allow for the trauma of this high ABV situation to sort of go away, and then have another sip that it's a little bit longer, and try to keep the alcohol inside your mouth as long as you can. Don't even wash your mouth with it. Just try to leave it there for as long as you can before it burns. And then try that again, but try it moving around your mouth. That will be the third exercise. I hope you're taking really tiny sips. I don't want everybody like drunk out of their minds after this.
We've actually talked about the three tastes before. So anybody that's done a happy hour with us before, where we focused on neat spirits, is already familiar with this. It's really important. One is, you, even if you've had water or something, the first one is acclimating yourself partially to the alcohol and partially to that particular thing. The next one is to, again, like Chava said, like let it sit for a minute. And then the third one is really where you like let it make its way around. And then you're also focusing a lot on the texture as well, as opposed to just the flavor.
Yes, and I think something fascinating is that with this high ABV, imagine like your mouth is super warm. It's tremendously warm for this amount of alcohol. So imagine how much of this alcohol is evaporating in the moment it touches your tongue. And as you're saying, you're making your whole head a cave of tasting. So maybe it does escape through your ears, eh, Daniel? Like we don't know, because a lot of that, yeah, it's just going up and just invading your whole head. And I think that's something that really makes agave spirits in this ABV so fascinating to try and to experience.
So
So that's
when you say fruity, I want people to understand that, because I think for a lot of folks, the moment they either smell or taste mezcal, all they get is campfire. All they get is smoke, or they get, you know, burnt tires, or, you know, rubber. Like, it's the way that people are immediately affected by peat when tasting, you know, Isla whiskeys and things like that, like iodine, like, you know, like, or the, you know, the funk of Jamaican rum. Like, it's the
yes,
thing that
like
makes it interesting, but it's also a thing that like is difficult, or like a little bit of a hump for people to jump over before they can really like understand. So when you say fruity to just like a newbie to mezcal, they're like, literally, Chava, what the hell are you talking about? That sounds
Well,
crazy.
well, but you know, this is something funny for me. I think this is like a matter of nationalities, almost in a way. When I was drinking mezcal from a very young age, I never thought about smokiness because nobody told me that. And then when I started meeting more people from the US of A, they started talking about the smoke. And I was like, then I found it in the mezcal that I had been drinking for years, but it was not something that was catching my attention in the beginning. It is true that there's a lot of smoke or peat in a lot of the agave spirits because the agave has very long chains of sugars. So if you take a raw agave and you yourself try to eat it, you're gonna die from explosive diarrhea. Your body is not designed to digest just raw agave. And yeasts, which are the guys in charge of making alcohol from sugars, cannot digest raw agave. So this agave is being cooked a lot of times with different types of woods. And depending on the type of wood that you're going to be using, you can create more smoke or less smoke on the profile. This specific one, the Lost Explorer, I will claim is an extremely clean expression in the sense that I cannot get a bunch of those like, you know, like peated elements that you're mentioning, Daniel.
Mm.
And I think like in the early 2010s, a lot of brands really went into the smoky train because they wanted to differentiate themselves from tequila. And they were like, okay, tequila is like such a recognizable flavor profile, right? Like it's like I call it like the really extrovert agave. It's impossible to pass by tequila and Weber and not realize that you're drinking tequila and Weber. But Espadin, it's almost like a lager of agaves. It's extremely plastic. There's not one characteristic of Espadin, at least for me. I mean, you can give me 25 different Espadines in a blind tasting, and I cannot pinpoint down what is the one characteristic that makes Espadin Espadin. Each Espadin will be fantastically transformed depending on who's working with it. And that's what makes it fascinating. So it can be extremely fruity like this. And then I think that's amazing also about that you have two Espadines from Oaxaca that are so close from each other. Sicaru and the Lost Explorer are made maybe half an hour of each other, and they are tremendously distinct, even if they use the same kind of agave. So I think that this fruity element in mezcales of today responds to the market being a little bit more interested in other flavors that were not just your typical campfire, which can be amazing. Huh? I'm not saying that the smoke, it's a terrible thing.
Yeah, it's also how people were introduced, right? And that's one of the things that we're trying to talk about today. And in general, with Shaker and Spoon, is we want, you know, one of my favorite things to hear is in any category really, where someone's like, oh, well, I never really liked gin before until I had the Shaker and Spoon cocktails. I'm like, that was the entire goal. So like you tried it, like maybe you're never gonna like it neat, maybe you're, but like now you can really appreciate gin and cocktails that aren't just gin and tonics. And it's the same thing with mezcal. Even if you have one that's at 40 or 42% and it's not closer to 50, and you taste it, you're like, it's very overwhelming. Once you get accustomed to like those cocktails, then you may actually end up appreciating some of the neat spirits. And quite frankly, it can bring you into understanding the elements that Chava was talking about where they're differentiated. So like, for example, you know, in the mid to late 2000s, you had two very distinct mezcal marks by the same company, which was Del Maguey, which a lot of people know. Right, and there was Chichicapa, and Chichicapa was the one that, like, first of all, very fun to say, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, it was the one that was very distinct. It was the one that was extremely distinct and very smoky, and it was that smack in the face. So if that was your first, I mean, and it's well made, it's well constructed, but if that was your first experience with mezcal, you're going to be like, maybe that's not for me. But if you tried Minero first, and that was like, if you like, you know, German or Austrian, like if you like Rieslings or things from Mosel, we've talked about this on the happy hours before, you get that slate, you get that that minerality that you wouldn't necessarily expect from that kind of spirit. And they're wholly divergent, even if like it's made by the same, by the same company. They're all different producers in different parts of
Mhm.
in terms of those two particular products. They're both Oaxaca, but they're vastly different just because of how they treat like what they do to the agave, etc. So hopefully this kind of thing, when Chava uses a term like fruity, it'll change your mode of thinking when you're first tasting things. You'll look for various elements. And again, also like he suggested, to leave one out a little bit longer, it's going to allow that alcohol to dissipate off of the top, and it's not going to sort of smack you, which is great.
And your room is going to smell amazing. So
And
that's also a perk.
Yeah.
And like also just in terms of experiencing the same thing in different ways. I have mentioned to get a bowl. It's hard to see, but this is full with ice. So I put a glass in a bowl full of ice to lower the temperature of the mezcal. And if you think about the places where this agave spirits or this mezcal is done, usually it tends to be in rather warm areas. So when you're room temperature means something very different wherever you guys are than what they are making this mezcal. And I also always claim that I like my mezcal like 3 Celsius above room temperature. I like to put it on my chest for a little moment and allow it to like gather some warmness. But it's also really interesting to get it cold. So what I did is 2 bowls, one with lukewarm water. I mean, it's impossible to see lukewarm, and another one with ice, and try to put the same mezcal in both bowls. And it's fascinating how they become almost like different expressions. If you were in a blind tasting, you will almost say that they are different bottles completely. And again, this just talks about God knows about all the chemicals and congeners and beautiful things that are inside these spirits that are extremely plastic and that can change depending on the temperature, whatever that was in your mouth during the day, your mood, how long have you had that bottle. It's very prone to mutating in a very good way.
Let's do, Chava, let's do a very simple taste through now that everybody's accustomed to this process. Let's do Zicaro. So we're sticking with Espadín. I find it to be like, the way that Chris Elford described it was that it was a great cocktail workhorse.
Okay.
Right. So, there are a lot of things where what I really like about all 3 of these, there are things that I would want to sip on their own and use them in cocktails. I think a lot of people sort of have, especially when you get to a higher price point, people are like, well, I don't want that in a cocktail. Well, you don't have to cover it up with sugar and citrus, but you could still do it in a cocktail. You could do more of like an old-fashioned style or something where you're actually adding some effervescence to it, and it'll really like pop certain aspects of the flavor. But to have something that is like, I would like to sip that on its own, and it works well in cocktails. This is a good example of that.
Well, and I think Zicaro, what it has to it that it's fascinating to me now that I just had the Lost Explorer, is that it's so connected to the essence of cooked agave. Like sometimes I remember when I was encountering this flavor profile early in my life, I was sure that they were adding something to it. I was like, there's no freaking way that something that you distill will taste this amazingly, because this tastes almost like a nectar. No, like this is something that it's so dense, the texture is so perfect. So I can see how this is a cocktail workhorse, because it's almost like having a syrup in the spirit itself. So you have like the syrup and the spirit being one same thing in the same product. And that's I think delicious. It's also, again, like this is crazy to me because these 2 spirits are made very close to each other, and the agaves that were used for each other are probably in almost the same fields. So you can see how important is the hand of the maker in really transforming the flavors and the aromas in one of the other. So yeah, I mean, this is again a dangerous bottle.
It's interesting how mezcal is such an interesting category in general, but there, like Chava was saying, even things that were made so close to one another can be so vastly different, even with the same, sometimes even the same maker, if it's either a different type of agave or like this, you know, it's coming from the other side of the hill. You know, Espadín is pretty hardy, so it can grow. Most of the time, it's actually being cultivated as opposed to some of the other ones you're seeing out there today, like Chobala, that can only, or for the most part, people have tried to cultivate them and it doesn't work out. They can only sort of grow wild. And so that's something that as mezcal grows as a category, I'm hoping we don't see less of. I would like to see more producers doing kind of weird stuff, but you know, make it a point to be, you know, familiarize yourself with this category. And just like with tequila, like Chava was talking about, if you're not smelling and tasting agave, something is potentially wrong, right? It doesn't have to be like the syrup, but the syrup, you know, take away the sweetness of the syrup, it's still going to smell like cooked agave, which is going to have obviously like it's the natural sweetness to it. I mean, they call it miel, which is honey, right? But it's going to have that natural sweetness to it. But it's not going to smell or taste kind of saccharine. It's not going to taste artificial, but it should smell and taste of actual agave. If it doesn't, it's either been over distilled or, you know, tweaked in some way. So make sure that you look out for that.
Yes, and I mean, to your point, I think right now, fortunately, happily, a lot of the people in the mezcal context, we're starting to understand how how big this is. You know, it's like, it's almost like, I feel like we're like Galileo, you know, like everybody's saying like, oh, the earth is the center of the universe, and then suddenly, Jesus Christ, there's a galaxy, and there's not only one galaxy, there's a bunch of galaxies out there, and we don't even know if there's only life on Earth. So that's right now the mezcal scene. It's not, it's the agaves, it's the many different traditions in which you can ferment them, mill them, cook them, distill them. And sometimes, even if it's not an agave, there's this thing called sotol, which is also its own whole world. And it's this plant that it's cousin to agave and has similar flavors, can be processed the same way. So, you know, like this is one happy hour, as in 1 hour. And I always claim that mezcal, unfortunately, goes well beyond the hour in order to even explain its basics. What I always try to tell people is the most important thing is to create a curiosity towards something that it's really like the new world of the agave spirit, of the alcohol, because even anybody that claims that it's a full expert of mezcal, they're blatantly lying. There's no one that it's a full expert. There's a bunch of people like me that have traveled a little bit, that have read a few things, that have access to the internet, that like to think that have tried a good share of agave spirits or mezcal, but nobody knows everything, because every town, every family, every agave in each different year will react differently. So it's not only what was there, but it's also the future of mezcal. It's really will be really surprising.
Has anybody in the happy hour today been to Oaxaca before, or to Michoacan, or to like another region where mezcal is made? Or anybody that has spent time in the region will recognize this, but sometimes these are the best mezcal.
Don't get me started bringing out my plastic bottles.
Right. It's such a common thing for someone to be like, oh, listen, you have to try this, and they'll hand you like a little plastic bottle because something is made in a batch of a handful of liters at a time, and it'll never be the same again. So, you know, some of the more famous places, especially in Oaxaca City, most of the things you see on the back bar are not what's like, Chava, if you move a little bit to your left, will not be like what's behind him, where you see like these recognizable bottles on the back shelf. They will be a bunch of jugs and a bunch of these little plastic bottles, because things are brought to this particular shop or store or bar in a handful of liters. And it's a way to like try through things. For the most part, people aren't doing cocktails. They may do like they may do like a taste of mezcal and then they're doing like squirt or something, or like soda or something like that on the side, but they're drinking all the mezcal neat and they just make their way across the back bar. Let's try La Luna together, just because we're I don't want us to run out of time. We still have to do trivia.
Yeah. And I brought my super fancy Michoacan cup specifically for La Luna. See that I call it the bling bling copita.
Is Michoacan a bling bling state?
It is where most of the copper steels are still made. And what it's crazy, it's some of the alembics are still fully handmade. Like there's not, it's a guy that makes a hot cake of copper and mills it until it gets thin and you get the whole alembic, which is something that I mean, they will formulate your copper to your needs. It's something that if you're in Germany, you will need to pay millions of dollars for a company to do that for you. And here in Mexico, you knock on somebody's door, it's like, hey, could you please make me this alembic that it's like super thick on the bottom and super thin on the walls? They're like, yeah, sure, we'll get it. Which is something that I love about agave spirits and mezcal, that, you know, like I think a lot of the industries of this world, they struggle a lot changing, right? Well, I'm gonna serve myself while I talk, because drinking and talking, it's
yeah. So to remind everybody, this is of the three, this is the one that has a different agave. This is Cupriata. It's an ensemble, so it's Espadín, Cupriata, and what? Because I poured myself minis. I didn't bring the whole bottle with me.
No worries. It's Manso Saguayo, which is a species that still has not been scientifically defined. So we just know the nickname of this agave. We don't know, the science says, I'm sorry, I still haven't had the funding to name this thing. So it's Michoacan, it's my home state. I was born there, so I have infinite love for it. And in terms of agave spirits and mezcal, I think they do some of the most beautiful things. This actually, it's fermented with the aid of something that we call pulque. Pulque, it's like, imagine a dirty sake. Is that well, I will say makoli, but not a lot of people have drank makoli, so I've stopped using that analogy.
There's two ways to talk about pulque. Number one, it's sort of like the predecessor in terms of agave spirits. So before tequila, there was pulque. If any of you had like a Basque cider or a natural fermentation cider of some kind, there's the best way to describe it is that it's a little farty. It's a little
farty.
Yeah. But pulque, like the way that Chava described it, is kind of like an unfiltered sake. So it can be, it'll be like milky, and they'll serve it. What are the names of the ceramic cups with the lip, Chava?
Well, like the pitchers, or
yeah, they almost look like amphoras. They look like
like cantaritos.
Is that what they're called, cantaritos?
Well, you can call them cantaritos. Yeah, I mean the whole paraphernalia of glasses to drink pulque, it's a thing to behold. But yeah, like you can have that. There's special glasses that were just designed and made for pulque. But it's as you say, a little bit farty. It's alive. It's a living drink, and that is being used to ferment this. And I think a lot of the flavors that you will find in this specific ensemble, if you really think about pulque and you don't think about farty, because that's not a fun thing to remind yourself when you're drinking, but just think about maybe lactic, like just meaty. A lot of those things I think are very present in the La Luna ensemble.
If any of you, there's actually like so what you can get now pretty commonly in the US is you can find various types of canned tepache. And tepache is usually, it's going to have a little more sugar, not that much, but a little more sugar, but it's natural fermentation. If any of you have had like a probiotic drink before, that's how tepache is now marketed. You can go into like nice little grocery stores and they'll have tepache. If you ever see that in a store, I'll type it in here so that you can see that.
Yeah, sort of
Tepache.
Mexican kombucha. Yeah,
Yeah.
sort of.
Right. So if you ever see that in a store and it's a flavor that is remotely interesting to you, just buy it. It's worth spending a couple bucks. I've had ones that are not good. I've had ones that are amazing. And that was just because like I saw it in the store. I was like, it's a couple bucks, let's give it a shot. And we found some really incredible brands. And what's cool about it, for those of you who don't like to consume that much sugar, they're very low. There's some of them are like 2-3 grams for a serving of a 12-ounce can, which is very low, right? Even natural coconut water is going to potentially be 11, 12.
Yeah.
So definitely worth checking it out. And that kind of thing is, if you're somewhere that has like tepache on the street, that's great to have. Question about pechuga mezcals.
Yeah.
You're gonna get him started in a way that we will not be able to come back. But
how much time do you have, guys?
We don't. But give them a brief description of what, like, first of all, there's the literal translation of pechuga, right? But then how that's used in terms of like what pechuga mezcal is, and the fact that it can be both meat and not meat.
Yeah, well, so the literal translation of that, it's when you go to the market and you ask for a chicken breast, you will ask for a pechuga. So the literal translation, at least in the way that the expression is used, is chicken breast. And the way I like to explain this is, imagine a little town in Mexico 100 years ago. There was not such thing as a liquor store. So there was 1 or 10 or 20 mezcaleros, and they were all making the same products. And I'm sure at some point someone said, like, I am bored of just my straight espadín, and they wanted to bring on some flavors that were connected to other stuff. And the way you make a pechuga, it depends in where you are, in which state you are. But I think the way you explained it in a nutshell, it's almost like making a gin. So either you hang something, and that something tends to be a chicken breast or a turkey breast or some sort of protein. I've heard coyote, I've heard iguana. You hang some sort of protein and you allow for all the vapors to travel through that protein and fruit sometimes, and that alcohol is going to be infused with that. Sometimes you just make like a soup. You throw all the protein and fruits and whatnot, as if you were making gin again, and you do a second distillation or third distillation with that, and you get all these crazy, insane flavors. Something that really cracks me up is that they tend to be really expensive, and they're just added fruit. They spend $10 more in a whole batch, and somehow they're charging twice the price for a bottle. So it's, again, something that cracks me up. A lot of mezcal nerds love them, but they will not drink aged agave. Because they say aged agave is interfering with the original agave flavors, and somehow iguana is not. So go figure it out. Like, it's just it's one of those weird things that exist in the spectrum of agave spirits.
Yeah. For again, if you have this type of experience, like if you have a place that does a bunch of different collections, those are the pechuga to try, because you'll never taste them again. It's a one-time thing, and you may find something like, there was one at oh my God, I'm totally spacing. What's the super famous mezcaleria in Guadalajara? Sorry?
Mesonte?
Mesonte is great, but I'm talking about the bar where they play like cumbia and stuff.
Pare de sufrir.
Thank you.
But that's like a dancing venue. I wouldn't say that's a bar.
It's the entire back bar is basically a chalkboard, and all of these different things are written there, and there'll be like a couple different types of pechuga. Some of them will be the fruit kind, so there'll be like dates and nuts and things like that, and some of them will be like venison or chicken breast or what have you. But pechuga, although it means breast, it has become the sort of common nomenclature for mezcal that has been either like, you can look at it almost like Bombay Sapphire, where they're using a Carter head still type thing, where they put a bunch of things in the cage and the vapors coming through it as it's making its way through. Or as Chava said, the other example where they literally just throw it in. into the distillate itself. But either way, it's, you know, every village does their own thing. If they're doing a celebration, it'll be like, oh, I took this mezcal that I made and I threw these things in it because this is what grows around. And it's very much what grows together goes together.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, you know, sometimes those flavors match so well. It's just really incredible. But
yeah, and I really believe it was an invention for a quinceañera party. You know, I think like quinceañera was like, Mom, Dad, I want something that tastes amazing for my very special day. And the pechuga was born.
yeah. And like, I happen to like bubble gum. Great, no problem. Bazooka Joe.
Yeah, throw it in there, girl. Yeah, absolutely.
So tasting notes on that last one, on the cupriata, on the ensemble.
Well, for me, again, like it's impossible for me not to really say all these pulque elements. So it's really lactic, it's meaty, and at the same time, it's very herbal in some capacity with connected to that. Again, no smoke at all, at least for my palate. Like I wouldn't be able to catch almost any smoke. They're a fascinating distillery. They are doing in like they make a lot of mezcal, but they do it in a very old school way. Like when I've been there, I always think like these kids are masochists. They really, really want to do a beautiful product and suffer for it. So this is something that, again, it's available all around the US, but it's made in extremely small batches.
Okay. Before folks go, I want to get into like the trivia, because we have some really awesome prizes, and I know sometimes people have kind of a tight schedule and they're paying close attention during the talk. I would also love to know in the chat, if did anybody taste anything in what you were tasting and smelling today that really jumped out as like an interesting flavor? Like the standard things you're going to get are, you know, our roasted agave. Sometimes you're going to get like a little bit of things that you would get off of, not off of oak, but things you would get off of toast, right? But if there's something that you tasted or smelled, put it in the chat. We're really curious to know, because sometimes those tasting notes are things that we want to explore more deeply into next time. And then, yeah, Liz mentioned mellowness when chilled versus room temp. You know, good example. So what Chava was talking about before is not putting the spirit on ice, but it would be like taking a larger glass like this, filling it with ice, and then taking like a small metal or ceramic thing and placing that on top.
Yeah,
you don't want to dilute the product. You just want to taste it chilled versus, you know, it would be basically
Caramel.
like it's a low pro version of basically putting something in the fridge. You don't want it too cold. You want it with a little bit of a chill. So sometimes take those edges off, and then that way you can focus a little more. But you're also going to be missing out on some of the, like we mentioned before, the small nuances of things that you won't get when it's tight, when it's cold, right? So I always find it funny when people take spirits and put them in the freezer. If your purpose is getting, you know, hammer time,
Wasted?
fantastic. Yeah, as they say in Espanol, hoisted. Then it's great. If you want to try something or like make a martini and you really don't want to taste the alcohol, and I get that, put it in the freezer. It's amazing. The first time I ever had Blanco that had been sitting on the ice in the bar, I made fun of them for it, and then I came off of working on the beach all day, and they poured me a glass, and I was like, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever had.
Yeah. And I love the notes they're giving us. Like, yes, like caramel, all kinds of spices. Yeah, I love it.
So we've got a couple of, you know, Chava did a deep dive here. And so the questions are going to be a little harder, but the prizes are pretty awesome. So we have a prize from each of the recommended mezcal. So, you know, we're pretty thrilled with it, because they were all great. When the bartenders made their recommendations, like, this is a really interesting collection of mezcal. So we're very pleased to see that. And they were nice enough to donate some cool things for you. The first one is going to be, what is the ABV range allowed in the mezcal denomination of origin?
Oof. I actually have
Oh, wow!
Nailed it.
Wow,
Oh,
that was fast.
wow. Who's Donna? She was fast. She
Really
had,
quick, really quick. Donna, you are correct. It
wow.
is 35 to 55% ABV. That was awesome.
Just a caveat on that, because I think it's really mind-boggling. Denomination of origin states 35 to 55, but you can only export to the US 40 ABV and plus. So in the US of A, you'll never find a bottle that is under 40 ABV because that's your internal weird regulations. So
And it's the
just,
same, it's the same with tequila.
it is
Like
the same with tequila, yeah.
like a lot until the last, I would say 15 years, I didn't see almost any 40% ABV tequilas in Mexico. I would see 35 and 38. So if
Correct.
you are somewhere and you see that, it's going to be a pretty fun, potentially more nuanced product where you're not hit as much with the alcohol, and it's pretty fun. Okay,
Yeah.
second question. We're getting a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Name the municipality where La Luna is made. He did mention it twice, and it's also his home state. So let's see if you can get that. No, it's not Oaxaca. Okay,
Michoacan?
so that's
Yeah.
the state. I need to know the municipality where La Luna is made.
Cha.
You may actually end up using the Oracle, aka the Googles. It may be available, but I'm not sure.
Or your bottle. Cotija is really close. Angie, like, how do you know that?
Cotilla, like honestly, I see Cotilla, I immediately think the cheese, but that's me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Villa Madre, almost. Well, these are fascinating answers.
Yeah.
But no, come on,
Yeah.
look at the bottle. The bottle says it.
Oh, I mean, that's a little bit of a cheat. Yeah. So sometimes like, I mean, with numbers, it's always easier, but like people will like, sometimes there's just a barrage of answers and then sometimes they trickle in because you know that they went over, did a Google real quick, came back.
But actually, James and Toby and Angela, it's sort of they're sort of right and they're wrong, because on Google it's stated that it's a tucuaro, but it's on the bottle they changed their facilities not that long ago, so the bottle has the right place. But if nobody finds the other one, a tucuaro can win because that's what it's listed on the internet.
Okay, hold on a second. I mean, you guys still have a chance, and this is a really good one. So highly recommend that you see if you can figure it out. So
No,
let's
it's
see.
not Villamadero.
All right, we're gonna give you guys a minute on that one. I'm gonna ask the third one because we were really pressed for time. No, it is Cupriata Ensemble. Cupriata is the type of agave. What we're looking for is it's the municipality,
Town.
it's the town of
Indaparapeo.
Michoacan.
She got it. She got it.
Oh, nice. Okay, Liz, nailed it. Name the scientific name of Espadin. The scientific name of Espadin, which means we're going to need genus species. So it's going to be 2 words. If it's like the first answer here, I'm going to be super impressed with that person.
Spratus. No, come on. Hocus pocus.
Always a troublemaker. Always one in a crowd.
I love that.
Yeah, it was mentioned twice during the thing. You're getting closer, but
well, it's Angustifolia can win. There's one specifically for the Angustifolia of Oaxaca. You are missing one word because
yes.
there's Angustifolia pacifica. There's Angustifolia.
Right. Angustifolia is the genus, and we need the species, right?
Well, no, agave will be the genus.
It's a subspecies,
Angustifolia. Yeah, but the subs. Well, I mean, Angustifolia can win. Whoever said first Angustifolia, but if somebody can throw the second word in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6,
nice.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay,
yeah.
So Toby and Angela, you get this one. Does anybody have any questions for Chava? We have a unique opportunity to, ask questions to someone who is very well spoken and also very familiar with this category.
Thanks, Danny.
Please feel free to ask many questions, and again, we'll put him into the Shaker and Spoon private group, and that way, if you could do sort of like an ask me anything with him and he can return. One of the questions was the mezcal that we let sit, does it still have alcohol in it? You're talking about the one that you did earlier or the one that you did during the happy hour, Andrew?
During overnight, it will, I don't think it has any, like it might have some traces of alcohol that just loves to be connected with water and won't evaporate, but we're talking like less than 1 ABV. So it's completely negligible. Honestly, I have not measured it, but yes, like you can drink a liter of that and won't get drunk if that's something you might want to pursue.
But the one that Chava told you to put aside about a half an hour ago, that will still
yes, that definitely has.
Yeah. Toby and Angela, what's the best non-margarita type cocktail for mezcal? I have an opinion, but I'd love for you to answer first.
The best non-margarita cocktail made out of mezcal, Paloma, of course.
Yeah, the Paloma is very easy. Honestly, think about if you were to ever take a grapefruit, slice it open, and have it for breakfast, where you have like the the triangular spoon where you can go into the pieces of grapefruit. What do people put on it? They put on salt, they put on like something savory. Sometimes they'll do brown sugar. Guess what? The brown sugar is agave, the salt is salt. Like doing a really beautiful Paloma is like having that, especially if it's fresh grapefruit and not like squirt, is such an excellent way to showcase mezcal. My other favorite, honestly, and I know that sounds strange, but sweet vermouth and bitters. But on the rocks.
No, that doesn't sound. That sounds delicious.
Imagine. So, does anyone here like Manhattans? Right, a lot of people love Manhattans. You're talking about a Rob Roy is the Scotch version of Manhattan. Everything's the same, right? So bringing it back to tying it into Scotch whiskey, you definitely have those elements that are a little more earthy, a little more like leather musky in mezcal. So to do that with like a non-overpowering smooth, I love like Carpano, like Antica. I love that one, but to do one that's a little bit lighter, either Italian or French, and then also like a little bit of bitters, or get creative and do like mole bitters or chocolate bitters or orange bitters, so that you don't have like Angostura and sweet vermouth. But that works amazingly well with mezcal. But I would tell you to do it on the rocks as opposed to up, because the dilution over time makes it pretty special. Yeah, and Angie wrote, add an orange or a squeeze of lime. Yeah, that you could do an orange peel on the one I'm talking about as well. A lot of Italians just drink vermouth that way. Orange twist, vermouth on the rocks. Bow and arrow cocktails: mezcal, bourbon, agave, pineapple, lemon. That sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that it's very common in Mexico is with sangrita. Have you tried that, Daniel, before? So you have a shot of tequila or mezcal, and then you have a shot of something that they tend to prepare in cantinas that respect themselves, so that it's spicy with tomato. It's almost like a salsa, but made to drink. So you'll get a sip. It's almost like a pickleback kind of, but without shooting it. It's more like a sipping pickleback. And it's
a great nice. This goes, I mean, I first started playing around with this with Blanco tequila, just like you want something that's a little bit sharp. But with mezcal, the combination of pineapple and jalapeno. Oof. So if you were to do like a sweet, savory sangrita, those combinations are phenomenal with mezcal. So, and again, I'm always going to recommend for you to do like, like a little, a little clay copita or a little jicara, something like this, to do like a neat pour. So you're doing like a half-ounce pour. You're not knocking yourself in the head with it. And then like maybe make some sangrita on the side. And again, the two easy ways to do it are the tomato one, which is almost like making Bloody Mary, but like without Worcestershire, right? You want to get that out of the mix, or something that's like sweet and savory and tangy. So like high acid pineapple, jalapeno. You don't want to overdo it on the jalapeno, but you could also do like bell pepper. That's kind of nice. So you have capsicum, but it's not spicy, right? So that you're getting like savory and sweet together. That it'll every time it works well. And then same thing if you want to do the sort of Manhattan on the rocks, with like orange peel twist or you know, cocoa bitters or something like that. Those are all flavors that work so well together.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
Oh, yeah. Liz wrote Sangritas in mi barrio. That's nice. That's funny. Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, sangritas can go bad. Like, I mean, I like it
yeah.
depends. There's good sangritas, bad sangritas. Like,
Oh, that's funny. Brenda also mentioned orgeat. Orgeat is a really great sweetening agent that doesn't take over, especially if it's a really nice orgeat. Small Hand Foods does a good one. Liber & Co does a good one. That's not overwhelmingly sweet, and they actually do like orange blossom water. They're very unique, and they're actual, like, anybody that has a nut allergy, please be careful. Make sure you read those labels. The only one that I know that's hypoallergenic is the Monin one, the Monin orgeat. But everybody else that's doing an orgeat, it's going to be real nuts. So just be careful. But she wrote Mezcal Lime Aperol orgeat. I mean, that is a classic cocktail for those who recognize that you're just swapping it up for mezcal. That sounds awesome. Highly recommend.
Yeah, love it.
So this is a good one too. Mary wrote cocoa smoke, 1.5 mezcal, half creme de cacao, half ancho. That's great.
Yes.
And then chocolate bears, orange oil spray. Great. See, and you talked about, you're worried whether or not people would have an atomizer. The shaker and spoon people have atomizers.
Hey, I have an atomizer too.
Yeah,
It's
but they
just
have little ones they can keep in their front pocket and whip out at parties. So yeah,
I get it. I get it.
guys, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, Chava, and thank you everyone for joining us.